So we started off a project on digital. One of our digital transformation projects was a project we called Asset Intelligence, where we really wanted to change the way that we manage the assets of BlueScope in terms of the heavy equipment, how we maintain it. We really wanted to modernise it and bring the new technologies into the way that we do this type of work. And predictive maintenance was one of these platforms, and it was actually the first platform that we started with. When we started looking at predictive maintenance, we wanted a solution that we could basically use anywhere across our manufacturing plants.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
I guess before we jump into the topic, which I'll introduce in a second, maybe Colin first, you could maybe introduce yourself to the audience, your role at BlueScope Steel.
Yes, so I'm Colin Robertson. I'm the Digital Transformation Manager for Australian Steel Products of the BlueScope Steel business, based in Port Kembla, which is near Sydney in Australia.
Fantastic. And Chris?
Yeah, my name's Chris Wonson. I'm the predictive maintenance lead for the BlueScope major manufacturing sites around Australia, and we also sort of support the rollout in the global sense as well.
Fantastic. And I guess for the audience's benefit, we're talking about the BlueScope and the BlueScope story, I guess, which involves Senseye, involves Siemens, but is obviously broader than that as well. But we're talking about, and you used the word, Chris, rollout, the rollout predictive maintenance at scale across multiple sites, and there's the challenges you faced, the opportunities that occurred, and obviously the successes you've seen as well. So that's what we're going to cover today. But I guess to kick things off, if I go over to you first, Colin, and we just talk about, if you could give us a sense of the scale of the operation at BlueScope Steel and why you sort of focused on, you made a decision to look at scalable predictive maintenance as part of that strategy.
Yeah, so BlueScope Steel, so we're a global steel business. We've got operations in Australia, New Zealand, US, ASEAN businesses. So we've got major steelmaking plants in Australia, US and New Zealand. And we also do mills and coating in a number of other countries. So roughly 14,000 people work for BlueScope. Our largest manufacturing site is here in Australia, the Port Kembla Steelworks. So approximately 2,000 people are based here in the site at Port Kembla. So Port Kembla is a full integrated steelworks, where we do everything from take the raw materials from the water off the ships through to finished product in the downstream parts of our business, where we make building products for roofs, etc., across the country.
And so what influenced that sort of decision to start looking at sort of predictive maintenance, a scalable solution as well?
So we started off a project on digital. One of our digital transformation projects was a project we called Asset Intelligence, where we really wanted to change the way that we manage the assets of BlueScope in terms of the heavy equipment, how we maintain it. We really wanted to modernise it and bring the new technologies into the way that we do this type of work. And predictive maintenance was one of these platforms, and it was actually the first platform that we started with. When we started looking at predictive maintenance, we wanted a solution that we could basically use anywhere across our manufacturing plants. We started with a concept of we would do a pilot plant here in Australia at our Spring Hill works. And from there, what we learned from that, we would be able to, if successful, roll it out across the globe. So that was always our intent from day one. But of course, we had to prove the concept and prove the value in a pilot plant here in Australia at Port Kembla.
And I guess just a follow up to that as well. So the vision was always to think at scale from the very start. When you were first time thinking about predictive maintenance, that was your first. You already had that in your mind. It wasn't something you developed over time.
Now, we always had a concept of modernising and introducing new technologies. And when we started looking at what should we do, predictive maintenance was quite clearly one of the things that we should start with. But it was always understood, we had full executive support on this really from day one, that if this was successful, we would be taking it across the globe to all of our manufacturing plants.
Absolutely. And I guess coming over to you, Chris, talking about that global rollout, which I can imagine has lots of challenges and things to consider. So what was sort of some of the key steps or things you put in place to ensure a consistent rollout of Senseye globally?
Yeah, well, smooth and consistent is definitely hard to achieve. Absolutely. But I think for me, sort of being the lead, always important to remain hands-on and always sort of doing every sort of aspect of predictive maintenance that we have. So from reviewing cases to conducting case reviews with different teams across the plant to onboarding assets to deploying sensors, like every aspect of I always need to remain in that. And also you need to have a little bit of time left over to innovate and look for new technologies, new sensors that can, fill any sort of gaps in your arsenal. Also, we need to always be mindful of our pain points and the parts that are sort of slowing us down and always be working on them with the different sort of support mechanisms around me. So that's always very important. I think you've always got to be willing to try anything and everything. That will, we always change our approach to try and streamline, become more efficient, be more sort of customer focused and making it easy on people. Because the people we need, our subject matter experts, they're very busy people. And when you sort of go into a new department, first off, you kind of ask, well, I need time from your experts. And, oh, by the way, I need some of your money. And, yeah, that's kind of hard to justify that. So you have to sort of look at their pain points themselves and try and get some early wins and get them on board. So I'm no longer driving the process. They start to drive the process themselves and start to dictate work to me. So that's early wins is important. That sort of makes things smooth. And a sort of like we're a conduit of a collaboration between, because lots of different departments do different things well. And there's other departments that, can benefit from, there might be a group of people that do pump monitoring really well and pump maintenance. And once we sort of work with that department, then we can take that sort of learning and knowledge back to other parts of the plant. And it's been a really good collaboration sort of project. And also to try and, like, from a global perspective, we did have a global forum in the middle of last year. We did actually bring some experts around from all our different parts of the world. And, of course, Siemens were there to help us sort of listen in real time to our pain points and immediately start to, understand, like, from all the different parts of the world that the pain points and how they can best sort of tune the tools to help us roll out at a consistent pace.
It's interesting because the next question I was going to ask you, Chris, was about how did you sort of manage the differences? Because obviously between different sites, there's different infrastructure, different culture, maybe sometimes different teams, different data, and trying to align that in a global rollout. But I think you've sort of answered that question there. But what was also interesting is you mentioned about the learning you can take from different sites of expertise, which I thought was really really cool and really, really important as well. Is there anything you could sort of add to that as well? Was there any other considerations when in certain circumstances plants are so different, all sites are so different?
Well, everything's different. Like, we have a very wide range of technologies and even different plants. Like, we are a steel mill that, like, in one end red dirt, out the other end is, finished steel products. So there's a very wide, and I certainly don't know how all of it works. I don't even know how a small part of it works. So I need to learn that from from other people, and like I'll teach them predictive maintenance, they'll teach me about their plants, and when we sort of marry our knowledge together, that's when we start to do some really interesting things. And like there's always things that seem impossible and difficult to do, but as you roll out with more people, it's just more minds collaborating, trying to solve those different problems. And data is always probably a what do you call it, a bottleneck or a challenge to deal with, but you've got to do the best with what you've got. And certainly there's always room to improve, but like good is still better than nothing, and you can always come back and turn good into great later on. That's definitely something you can work with. You get better at understanding, working recently in a really big outgoing gas filtering system and monitoring around 40 temperatures at the same time, trying to look for any sort of change in normal operating conditions and temperatures. Those temperatures are integers, and we're trying to find out very subtle changes in temperature. The difference between having an integer and 1 decimal point would be very, very helpful. But we take what we can get, and that just means that we might need to see a change of 3 or 4 degrees rather than 1 or 2 degrees before we start to get detection. So we do the best with what we've got, and I think we've learned over the years that to do the best with what you've got is better than nothing. And then it goes back to, well, to get that decimal place in those temperatures, what's the effort? Is it worth it? Can we justify it? Can we spend the money? Can we dedicate the resource? And that's just kind of a normal business process.
Yeah. I'd also from what you're describing now, it's not letting something not little, but an issue that occurs holding you back. Because sometimes people go, "Oh no, the data's not right, so we're going to have to delay things." But by the sound of it, you sort of persevered and tried to find a resolution so you can then move forward. That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, that's right. There's because we've got varying, ages of plants and different levels of technology. There's lots of plants where some of the updates might not have come as regularly as what they've liked, and instead of having a pressure transmitter, you've just got a pressure switch that says it's too low, stop the process. But when the data's not there, you kind of just look at, well, what are your problems? It's just the classic, what are your failure modes? What data do you have that tells you about that failure mode? And sometimes it's up to your customers to look at what the data they've got, and knowing that the data is only going to get them halfway there. So there's some examples where some of the better wins we've had is on really simple data, just monitoring how often pumps start and stop per day. And when you get a change in that, what does that actually mean? And the asset teams have to fill in the gaps on that one, and they know that if that pump starts 1 or 2 times in a shift, that's normal. When it starts 4 or 5 times a shift, that's abnormal, and that just means that, and the app's not going to point them to where the leak is, right? But they've got to kind of join the dots on that, and they know that pump services cylinder A, B, and C. It's go for a walk and look for the puddle on the floor most of the time, and it's quite simple. But they've if you've got a willing participant with a little bit of data, you can do some quite good things. So we do what we can with what we've got most of the time. There's also a space and we've got very complex plant, very big plant. There's lots of data floating around. When we identify failure modes that we don't have data for, we can always try to supplement that with some IoT data as well.
Absolutely. And maybe this is a good time to talk about Senseye, the app, as we've sort of mentioned it a little bit. But Colin, in terms of selecting Senseye, what was sort of the criteria behind that? Was there certain features or functionality that stood out for your goals, as you've described?
Yeah, so we started looking at predictive maintenance probably about 4 years ago now, and it would be fair to say that when we did start looking, we certainly didn't know much about predictive maintenance. So we were very much relying on the vendors to explain to us the capabilities of the platform, what could be done. So we started learning from vendors. And then we started encouraging vendors to put forward proposals. And some of the things that really mattered to us were the usability, so the user experience of the app. We wanted that to be something that people could use. We didn't want it to be something that was seen as being another system that was potentially going to add to their workload. So we liked what we saw with Senseye with that. We liked the idea that we could build the actual the models out from Senseye, and so we could tell the app what we wanted to measure, how we wanted to compare it. We could set thresholds, etc. We liked that about the app, and we probably the thing that really convinced us to go with Senseye is we did like the idea that we could build it ourselves, and we could have a system that we could build the capability within our workforce to really introduce them to what predictive maintenance was and is.
And I guess, Chris, an important part of this, so it's interesting what you're saying, Colin, something that, you could teach predictive maintenance to the workforce, but to do that requires obviously training and adoption as well. So maybe you could talk about how you engage local teams with the Senseye deployment and to make it a success at each plant as you rolled it out.
Yeah, like Colin said, we definitely wanted to remain sort of self-sufficient in a predictive maintenance space. That was always our goal from the start, and that meant we've developed a small team of predictive maintenance practitioners. We do have a lot of interaction with our SME. So, but there was a need to train people because we were a small team. We had a few departments that we were directed to start with. And that took a very large part of our time because they were, for various business reasons, they were, prioritised with the first people to receive predictive maintenance. But we had so much interest and so many different people coming to us for help. It felt really terrible to sort of say, sorry, we're busy over there. So we needed a system that wasn't too taxing on the team itself, but we could give people a bit of a taste and an experience, like sort of hands-on, how to start your predictive maintenance. We called it Senseye School. So we would have, it was about a dozen people at a time. We'd sort of do about 12 hours worth of training. And it was the system front to back, from identifying what assets to, maybe deploy on, to collecting data, to getting the data into our historian, where we sort of launch it from there into Senseye, doing a little bit of the off-state filtering, and thinking about control parameters, and then from there, obviously all the configurations once your data's into Senseye. And was it successful? Not for everyone, but it helped us identify the ones that had a bit of a flair for it, and then they were the ones that we sort of targeted to become our sort of super users and maybe some sort of lead in that particular department, moving forward. So training's tough. Particularly, there's been so many updates to the Senseye app since we first got it. It's kind of hard to stay on top of it, and we're always redoing our training every 6 months. So that's kind of our story with training. But definitely, so once we sort of had that going at Port Kembla, then we sort of roll that out into our Western Port people down there as well. So training is definitely a big part, and we've tried different approaches to it as well. First go was 6 2-hour sessions, and then we 3 4-hour sessions, and then we sort of refined it a little bit more as upgrades in the app sort of occurred. Then it's we don't have to train people in that anymore. So there's kind of a bit of a moving feast on how we do that. But it was always about small amounts of PowerPoint presentations, lots of hands-on keyboards, actually working with some relevant data from their own department, and they had their own little working model as they sort of left. And we did make a little bit of noise within the company about the first batch of people that went through that, because it was I guess it was a lot more successful than what we wanted, and those first batch of people, they've proven to be some of our key stakeholders in predictive maintenance around the plant. So yeah, very good.
Yeah, it's almost like you were learning as well as you go about how to improve the learning if that makes sense. So you're constantly iterating on how to best teach people about the Senseye app and within the BlueScope environment.
Absolutely. I mean, we will never stop learning how to do predictive maintenance better, and sometimes the success doesn't come, but we're always learning, getting better, getting more efficient. That'll never stop. And I didn't come from any sort of background. I came from a maintenance background, but it certainly wasn't anything to do with predictive or data management or anything like that. So I learned it all from scratch. With obviously we learned Senseye from Natalie was the big person at the start for us. So she helped us develop and as you sort of start to have to own it yourself, you see the steps that she sort of instilled in us. We just rolled that out to our own people. It's just we were delivering the training and the onboarding and the upskilling ourselves rather than Natalie having to do it all for us. So
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned as you're onboarding and some, I guess, regions maybe took it or sites adopted Senseye quicker than others, which is completely natural. But maybe, Colin, you could share some examples of where there was a sort of a quick uptake in terms of Senseye.
Yeah, so as I said at the start, we started with a pilot plant here at our Spring Hill metal coating lines to actually prove the technology, prove that it worked, prove that we could get value from it. But as you would understand, we had to start with the commercials, then we had to start with building the foundations. Where did we have data? How were we going to get data from the plant into Senseye? Where did we have gaps? And we were going to fill these gaps with IoT sensors. That was all done here probably over a period of about 18 months. And that was a challenge. There's no doubt about it. We were working with plant people. We were working with the IT department. We had a whole load of things that we had to work through. Our next plant that we went to was our Western Port plant in Victoria in southern Australia. They started around about Christmas time. They actually kicked off their license in February. And they had their first success case in May. So within 3 months of starting, they had their first success case. The benefits of us standardising, doing the integration work and saying, here, this is how to do it, that was immense. And it allowed the Western Port plant to share the learnings from here and actually install the devices, get the app up and running on select equipment, and they were able to justify the project within a matter of months, as opposed to what we were saying would probably be about 18 months here at our first plant.
And that's amazing success in 3 months, and it is something we see quite often with Senseye as well. So it's really great to hear. I guess when we talk about the global picture as well, I guess a critical part of it is how you share those wins throughout the business. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, Colin. How did the word get out to other parts of the business as well? Maybe not even just plants, but just you mentioned IT and other stakeholders that also be interested, right?
Yeah. So after the success in Australia and Port Kembla and Western Port, our next plant that we went to was New Zealand. And then the next plant in parallel to that was Thailand in our ASEAN region. And by that time, we had proven the model of rollout would work based on what we did at the Western Port rollout. So, yeah, a little bit of autonomy because each of these sites had their own IT group. So we had to go back and do a bit of consolidation there. But the principles were the same. This is how we're going to get information through from the plant to Senseye. The plant-based people that we're talking about, they came and spent time with Chris on what we call the Senseye School. We identified people in these plants that we now refer to as the lead, as the champion for that region. And we had a system going there where we would share learnings, we would spend time with them from our central group, and we would help them get established on this. And then we'd share the success cases, and there's nothing better for a plant that's getting started on Senseye than to have their first win, their first success case. So we encouraged that, and we published that. We always had solid support from our executive, so we used to report up the successes, regardless of where they happened, whether it was in Australia, in Thailand, or in New Zealand, and now we've started in the US as well.
Excellent. And the word, I guess the word that springs to mind for me is it's all about momentum. It's keeping the momentum. If you get a win early on, then it sort of gives it the push to really sort of accelerate. I mean, if you see success, it's natural that you'd want to continue and expand quicker, right? So I guess that's your experience too.
It's certainly been our experience. Every plant that we've gone to, almost like grudgingly accept that we're coming to help them until they get their first win, until they get their first success. Then we get momentum. But then, of course, we need to maintain that. And that's probably been our biggest challenge on the rollout, is just maintaining that momentum and just keeping, because with any major industrial business, we've got a number of priorities that we're working on at any one time. The Senseye rollout is one of them. And so people have discretionary time. We want them to use it on Senseye. Other projects want them to do something else. So that's always been a challenge for us, and it still remains a challenge. But absolutely, getting the first successes is what drives the momentum and buy-in from the various plants.
Yeah, it's almost that the internal competition in terms of not competition, but I get exactly what you're saying. There's lots of different priorities, so it's difficult to people to focus. Well, they can't focus on one thing; they have to sort of balance out other priorities too. So I can definitely see where you're coming from there. So just to shift gears, I guess in terms of another check, you mentioned challenges. Though that challenge there, but Chris, in terms of the data side of things, which we all know is sort of critical to sort of successful deployments, how did you sort of approach maintaining sort of data consistency and quality during this rollout with so many different moving parts and so many different things happening?
Yeah, and it's so variable across the plants because we're drawing data from different parts. Some places we draw from like a HMI, other places we're drawing straight from a PLC, and the data update rates is really what quality is related to, and that's so variable across what's available in different departments. And of course, there's all those connections from our historian to those sources. So there's a lot of moving parts to maintain, and that takes a lot of sort of people power to keep that all sort of functioning. We can't just connect everything with everything because it's nice to have. There's only a limited amount of resources, so we've got to kind of be quite savvy with what we do. We are supported quite well with our OT teams. They do a great job. We do things like we made some of our business decisions about Senseye and data management around 4 years ago, and we made the best decisions we could at the time. The capability of Senseye has just to handle data, different volumes of data now is obviously a lot different and a lot better, but we sort of went down a path that we can't really reverse out of at the moment. So data's really difficult, and you kind of back to the old take what you can get, do the best you can with it, justify some sort of upgrade where you can. Being consistent. One of the challenges you have is marrying your sort of IoT data with your plant, like high frequency data. So there's a little bit of learnings to discover there, and then obviously there's teachings as well. So there's a lot to get that. And I think back to our Senseye School, at least half of it was the data management side of things, not just the Senseye side. Like the Senseye stuff is it wouldn't even come up to like the second half of it all. So there's a lot of pre-work in understanding what assets we want and what data is available and how we get the data to where we need it, get it conditioned, get it offstate filtered, and then it's across to Senseye. So there's a big component there for for not just that there's the training and the understanding, and it's a complicated part to it. I think the Senseye stuff, I can teach people that stuff quite easily, and it's reasonably straightforward. I think we find that a lot of when we go to a super user, a lot of the training is to do with data and data management, data consistency, making people sort of data mature and understand how to make that, how we need it to get it into Senseye. So there's a lot.
There's a lot. No, exactly. I can only imagine the challenges as well. But
just on that one,
yeah, sure.
Can jump in there. So what Chris is referring to there is, we started on this journey about 3 or 4 years ago in Australia, but we have taken the lessons to some of the other countries that we've rolled out. So some of the things, the way that we did it here, has been refined by the time that, for example, we've just recently started in the US, and that's been refined in terms of how we shift the data about. I think that's a key point here in terms of we're not like Chris used the term that we might not be able to reverse out. Well, that doesn't mean that the next business that tries to roll out Senseye can't take a different approach to this based on the learnings that we've had here.
Yeah, and I mean that's key to everything. A lot of what you've said today about learnings, taking them forward into the next thing. So of course you'd shift direction if something didn't quite work as expected somewhere else, and you take that into the next deployment. I guess that's very important. So I guess as we sort of come to a close, I want to sort of finish on sort of looking at the sort of business impact you've seen from sort of scaling predictive maintenance with Senseye. So I guess sort of over to you, Colin. Is there any sort of metrics or improvements that you can sort of discuss here?
Yeah, there is. So we've certainly had success on the project, which is really the justification that we've had to continue rolling out globally. But if you consider, where we started in Australia, our key objective was reducing unscheduled delays in our plants. And of course, reducing unscheduled delays means more tons, means more money coming back into the business. So absolutely, we have delivered that substantially more than the cost of the rollout of the project. But there's been other benefits as well in terms of it has allowed us to understand our plant a bit more. It's allowed us to cancel planned maintenance because we're now monitoring the equipment and we know that it's still fit for purpose. We don't actually need to do time-based maintenance. So there's been a number of benefits like that certainly helped us going forward. And also just the idea that we've now got a platform that can help people understand what their equipment's doing. And some of the simple examples, like one of the ones that Chris mentioned there about being able to find oil leaks. Well, usually you find an oil leak because somebody stands in it or somebody sees it. But we're now actually saying through Senseye, I think we've got a leak starting here. Go and have a look in this particular area. So there's a whole load of housekeeping, environmental type benefits that we're also getting. But by far and away, the biggest benefit is the reduction in unscheduled delays and therefore increased throughput for the plants. And we've now seen that at our two major plants in Australia. We've seen it in Thailand. We've seen it in New Zealand, and it's just a matter of months before we see it in our US plants as well.
And Chris, is there anything you'd like to sort of add to what Colin said there in terms of what, from your perspective?
I think he's covered off that side of it quite well. What we're sort of looking at now, I think, is understanding what good looks like in terms of a Senseye deployment and how people are using the tool. Like maybe our earlier on understanding of that wasn't quite accurate, but I think we're getting a really good understanding of what good looks like, what embedding looks like, and we're working towards, when those sort of first departments move into that space and then really publicising and advertising, because it just builds momentum, and that's probably the only thing I'll have to add to that.
Oh, fantastic. And I guess, Colin, as a final note, sort of looking into the future as well. So you mentioned the US deployment as well, but so where do you see sort of the next stage for predictive maintenance as a strategy within BlueScope, and and where does it go next in terms of deployment?
Well, hopefully everywhere. That's the first comment. What I would say is that in Australia, we're probably covered maybe about less than 20% of our operating plan. So there's a massive task to get that number closer to 100% in Australia. Likewise, New Zealand, they're probably even less, they're probably about 10% just now. So the plants that we are established in, there's a challenge to get much closer to what we would call saturation of the equipment being monitored. In our ASEAN region, Thailand's successfully got it happening in one plant there. They've got another 3 plants to roll out. And then hopefully the rest of the ASEAN region, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, hopefully they see the success and continue with the rollout. And then, our US business has started. We want to make sure that they continue to see the potential and they continue to see the benefits. And again, they've only just started, so there's significant opportunity for the US business to roll out. And for us here in the Australian team, our role is just to support as much as possible that global rollout and make sure that we remain the central location for any interactions with the Senseye and Siemens teams. So that's probably how I see it going in the next few years.
Fantastic. And I always do some of these types of interviews. There's always one more question, and so there is one final question. I guess maybe from both of you briefly, if there's something for people watching the recording today at our event to take away about what to think about when looking to deploy predictive maintenance at scale, what would that be? In very brief. So maybe if we go to Chris first, and then Colin.
I would just say it's so hard to understand it before you try it. You learn more as you're doing it, rather than sort of any sort of pre-planning is great, but you got to be able to change direction based on what you learn as you go to increase your efficiency and your rollout kind of speed. So I'd say start, and there's some, the developments in the app are thick and fast at the moment, and we're just about to start with being able to upload documents and procedures into the Copilot, which is going to be a game changer, I think, for our regular users, like the people that don't do the configuring, because you configure, you understand how it all works, but if you're just a user looking at measures here and there and cases, having that Copilot being able to not just draw on case feedback, but also being able to upload document is going to be a really big game changer, and also like knowledge retention. It's amazing. Can't wait to get into that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. And from your side, Colin?
So I'd say the key focus has to be on change management. We've proven the technology works, but that doesn't mean to say that the end users accept that. So when we're talking change management, that has to involve, it really has to be run by the end user, so the plant where we're actually going to apply Senseye. Because as I say, we've proven that the platform works, that the technology works. We've got a standard rollout process, but if the people that basically own the assets, if they don't accept that, and if they're not prepared to make it work for their plant, make their life easier, then you won't have a successful rollout.
Excellent. Yeah, and really great way to finish today. So yeah, I'd like to thank you both very much for your time and sharing the BlueScope story. It's always a pleasure to interview you about this topic. Fantastic story. And yes, that's this session completed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Niall. Thanks.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.